I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves as Carson's family started gathering around the dining table. It was supposed to be a joyful Thanksgiving reunion, but Marlene's constant jabs and snide remarks made it feel more like a battlefield. As I placed the last dish on the table, Marlene looked at me with a smirk. My, Evelyn, aren't we just the little housewife today? She said, her voice dripping with condescension. I do hope you remember that being a good wife requires more than just cooking. I clenched my jaw, fighting back the urge to snap at her. This was her game, provoking me in front of everyone until I lost my cool. Mother, please, Carson interjected, sensing the tension. Evelyn has been working hard on her freelance projects. She's more than just a housewife. Marlene scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. Oh, Carson, don't be fooled by her little hobby. We both know it's not a real career. The room fell silent as her words hung in the air, cutting deep. I felt the blood rush to my cheeks, my hands trembling with a mix of anger and humiliation. Before I could respond, Carson's aunt chimed in, attempting to defuse the situation. Let's not ruin the holiday with petty arguments, she said, shooting Marlene a disapproving look. Evelyn's work is her own business. But Marlene wasn't done. She turned to me, her eyes cold and calculating. You know, dear, if you can't contribute financially, the least you could do is maintain a proper household. This place is a mess. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but the words caught in my throat. Carson squeezed my hand under the table, a silent plea for me to stay calm. But inside, I was seething. This was just the beginning of Marlene's relentless campaign to undermine me, and I knew it was only going to get worse. As the meal progressed, I could feel her eyes on me, judging my every move. I tried to tune out her snide comments, focusing instead on the warm presence of Carson by my side. But with each dig, each backhanded remark, a part of me began to wither, my confidence slowly eroding under the weight of her cruelty. Little did I know, this was just the start of a long, tumultuous battle. One that would test my resilience to the core and force me to confront the toxic dynamics that had plagued our family for far too long. After that disastrous Thanksgiving dinner, I should have seen the warning signs, but I was too blinded by my love for Carson and my determination to make our living situation work. Little did I know, Marlene was just getting started on her campaign to make my life a living hell. It began with the unannounced visits. At first, they seemed innocent enough. She'd show up at our doorstep, claiming she was just checking in on us. But soon, her true intentions became clear. Evelyn, dear, have you even cleaned this week? She'd say, running her perfectly manicured finger along the surface of our coffee table, inspecting for dust. A good wife keeps an immaculate home for her husband. I'd bite my tongue, forcing a polite smile as she critiqued every aspect of our modest apartment. The way I organized the bookshelves, the dishes piled in the sink, the laundry basket overflowing in the corner, nothing escaped her scrutinizing gaze. But it didn't stop there. Marlene would seize any opportunity to undermine my freelance work, questioning my little hobby and insinuating that it would never amount to a real career. Graphic design? That's cute, she'd scoff, peering over my shoulder as I worked on a project. But when are you going to find a real job, dear? Carson can't support you forever. Carson, bless his heart, would try to defend me. But Marlene had a way of twisting her words, making him doubt himself. I'm just looking out for you, son, she'd say, her saccharine tone masking the venom beneath. A man needs a wife who can contribute, not just play around with crayons all day. As the weeks went by, her barbs became sharper, her criticisms more biting. I could feel my self-esteem crumbling with each visit, each snide remark chipping away at my confidence. But the worst part? Marlene had no qualms about airing our dirty laundry to the entire neighborhood. I'd overhear her gossiping with the other wives, painting me as a lazy, incompetent freeloader who was dragging her poor son down. Evelyn's just not cut out for this, she'd say, her voice dripping with disdain. Carson deserves so much better. I tried to brush it off, to hold my head high and ignore her venom. But deep down, her words were taking root, planting seeds of doubt and insecurity that threatened to consume me whole. It was only a matter of time before something had to give. And when it did, the fallout would be explosive, shattering the fragile facade of our family and exposing the toxic truth that had been festering beneath the surface for far too long. The breaking point came on a sunny Tuesday afternoon. Marlene had let herself in, as usual, her presence announced by the sharp click of her heels against the hardwood floor. I steeled myself for another round of criticism, but nothing could have prepared me for what was about to unfold. "Evelyn, what is this?" she demanded, holding up a half-empty bottle of wine I'd left on the counter. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "It's just a bottle of wine, Marlene. I had a glass with dinner last night." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of disgust cross her face. "A glass? Don't lie to me, girl. This bottle is nearly empty." I opened my mouth to protest, but she cut me off, her voice rising with each accusation. "I knew it. You're just a lazy, good-for-nothing drunk, aren't you? Is this how you spend your days while my son is out working his ass off to support your sorry excuse for a life?" The words stung like a physical blow, and I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. But before I could respond, she delivered the final blow. "If you were a better wife, Carson wouldn't be having second thoughts about this marriage." Time seemed to stand still as her words echoed in the tiny apartment. I searched her face for any trace of remorse, but found none, only cold, calculated malice. Something snapped inside me then, a dam of pent-up frustration and resentment finally bursting. Without thinking, I grabbed the offending wine bottle and hurled it across the room, the glass shattering against the wall in a spray of crimson. "How dare you?" I shouted, my voice trembling with rage. "You have no right to come into our home and spew your venom like that." Marlene recoiled, her perfectly coiffed mask of indifference cracking for just a moment. But it was enough. I had finally struck a nerve. "You think you can just walk all over me, treat me like some worthless piece of trash?" I continued, the words tumbling out in a torrent. "Well, I'm done. I'm done letting you make me feel small, make me doubt myself. Your son loves me, and that's all that matters." For once, Marlene was speechless, her mouth hanging open in shock. But I wasn't finished. "You want to know why Carson is having doubts? It's because of you and your constant meddling. You're the one tearing this family apart with your toxic behavior." The silence that followed was deafening, the air thick with tension and unspoken words. And in that moment, a shift occurred, a seismic upheaval in the balance of power that had governed our relationship for far too long. Marlene recovered quickly, her face twisting into a sneer. "You ungrateful little witch." For she spat. "You'll regret this." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving a trail of shattered glass and broken trust in her wake. As the door slammed behind her, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The dam had been breached, and there was no going back. The war had begun, and Marlene had just thrown the first punch. Little did she know I was just getting started. Carson came home to a war zone that evening. Shards of glass littered the floor, the deep red stain on the wall, a stark reminder of the battle that had taken place. I sat on the couch, my hands trembling, my heart still racing from the confrontation with Marlene. "Evelyn, what happened?" he asked, his eyes wide with concern. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Your mother happened." His face fell as he surveyed the damage. "What did she do this time?" The words spilled out in a torrent, each one laced with the anger and hurt that had been festering for months. I told him everything, the insults, the accusations, the cruel insinuation that our marriage was in jeopardy because of me. Carson's jaw tightened as he listened, his eyes darkening with a mix of rage and sorrow. When I finished, he let out a heavy sigh, running his fingers through his hair. "I'm so sorry, Ev," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I had no idea it had gotten this bad." I shook my head, blinking back tears. "It's not your fault. Your mother is the one who's out of control." He nodded, his expression grave. "I know, and I'm going to put a stop to it." Before I could protest, he was out the door, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. I could only imagine the confrontation that was about to unfold, but a part of me couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. It was about time Marlene faced some consequences for her actions. The next few days were tense, to say the least. Carson refused to divulge the details of his conversation with his mother, but the strain was evident in his silence, his furrowed brow, the way he seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. Marlene, for her part, was eerily quiet. No unannounced visits, no snide remarks, no attempts to undermine me or our marriage. It should have been a relief, But instead, the silence felt ominous, like the calm before the storm. And then, one evening over dinner, the dam broke. "She thinks you're turning me against her," Carson said, his voice low and heavy with emotion. I froze, my fork clattering against my plate. "What?" He sighed, rubbing his temples with his fingers. "That's what she said. She thinks you're manipulating me, poisoning my mind against her." The absurdity of it all was almost laughable, if it weren't so painfully tragic. "That's ridiculous," I said, shaking my head. "I would never do that." Carson reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "I know," he said, his eyes searching mine. "But she's convinced herself that it's true. And now she's playing the victim, saying you're tearing this family apart." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Tearing the family apart? She's the one who's been waging a war against me from the moment we got here." He nodded, his expression grim. "I know, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air, a silent acknowledgement of the toll this battle had taken on our relationship, our trust, our very foundation. In that moment, I knew we were at a crossroads. We could either let Marlene's manipulation and toxicity continue to fester, poisoning us from the inside out, or we could make a stand, once and for all. The choice was clear, but the path ahead was anything but certain. All I knew was that I wouldn't back down. Not this time. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. Marlene had discovered my blog, the one I'd started as a cathartic outlet, a place to vent my frustrations and connect with others dealing with toxic family dynamics. At first, it had been a private sanctuary, a digital diary of sorts. But then, slowly, it had gained traction, amassing a small but dedicated following of readers who resonated with my struggles. But now, it had become a weapon in Marlene's hands. "You dare to defame me on the internet?" she seethed, her perfectly coiffed exterior cracking with barely contained rage. "Do you have any idea the damage you've done to my reputation?" I stood my ground, squaring my shoulders as she waved a printout of my latest blog post in my face. "I haven't defamed anyone. I've simply told my story." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought she might actually lunge at me. "Your story? You mean your pathetic attempt to turn my own son against me, to paint me as some kind of monster?" Carson, bless his heart, tried to intervene, stepping between us like a human shield. "Mother, please, let's all just take a deep breath." But Marlene was beyond reason, her anger bubbling over like a volcano ready to erupt. "Don't you dare take her side in this, Carson," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "She's the one who's been poisoning your mind with her lies." I opened my mouth to protest, but she cut me off with a sharp wave of her hand. "Mark my words, Evelyn," she hissed, her eyes burning with a cold fury. "If you don't take that blog down and issue a public apology, I will sue you for defamation. I will bury you in legal fees until you have nothing left." The weight of her threat hung heavy in the air, suffocating me with its implications. I knew Marlene well enough to recognize that this wasn't just an empty threat. She was prepared to follow through, to wage war with every legal and financial resource at her disposal. But as I looked into her eyes, something shifted within me. A spark of defiance ignited, a fierce determination to stand my ground and fight back against her toxic reign of terror. "No," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "I won't take it down, and I won't apologize. Not for telling the truth." Marlene's perfectly painted mask of composure slipped, revealing a flash of pure, unbridled rage. "You insolent little—" "That's enough, Mother." Carson's voice cut through the tension like a knife, startling us both. He stepped forward, his expression resolute, a newfound strength radiating from his very core. "Evelyn is my wife," he said, his gaze locking with Marlene's, "and I won't stand by while you threaten and bully her any longer." Marlene's jaw dropped, her perfectly manicured defenses crumbling in the face of her son's unexpected rebellion. "Carson, you can't be serious." But he was. In that moment, I saw a man who had finally found the courage to stand up to the toxic force that had controlled his life for far too long. "I am serious," he said, his voice unwavering, "and if you think I'm going to let you sue my wife, you're sorely mistaken." Marlene's eyes narrowed, her mouth twisting into a sneer. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her words dripping with venom. "Both of you." And with that, she turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving a trail of broken promises and shattered trust in her wake. As the door slammed behind her, I let out a shuddering breath, the weight of the confrontation finally lifting from my shoulders. Carson pulled me into his arms, holding me tight as a new sense of resolve washed over us both. The battle lines had been drawn and there was no turning back. But for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that, against all odds, we could emerge victorious, battered but unbroken, our love and resilience stronger than ever before. The day of the community event dawned bright and clear, a perfect backdrop for the storm that was about to unfold. As Carson and I made our way to the town square, I could feel the weight of anticipation pressing down on me, a mix of nervous energy and steely resolve. We had spent weeks preparing for this moment, gathering evidence and testimonies from others who had been victimized by Marlene's manipulative ways. It was a risk, laying bare our family's dirty laundry for all to see, but it was a risk we had to take. Marlene, of course, was already there, holding court among her adoring circle of socialites and community leaders. Her perfectly coiffed exterior betrayed no hint of the turmoil that was about to descend upon her carefully cultivated image. As the event began, I caught her gaze from across the crowd. Her eyes narrowed, a silent warning that only fueled my determination. This was it, the moment of reckoning we had been building towards. When it was my turn to take the stage, the hush that fell over the crowd was palpable. I could feel their curious gazes, their hushed whispers rippling through the air like waves. "Thank you all for coming today," I began, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. As many of you know, I've been outspoken about the insidious nature of toxic family dynamics and the toll they can take on our lives. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Marlene stiffen, her perfectly painted mask slipping ever so slightly. "For too long, I stayed silent," I continued, my words gaining strength with each syllable. "I allowed myself to be manipulated, belittled, and undermined by someone who was supposed to love and support me." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but I pressed on, undeterred. "That person is Marlene Westbrook, my mother-in-law, and a respected member of this community." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "But behind closed doors, she is a master of manipulation, using fear and guilt as weapons to control those around her." Marlene's face contorted with rage, but before she could protest, I held up a hand, silencing her. "Don't believe me? Let me share with you just a few examples of her cruelty." One by one, I unveiled the evidence we had compiled, the documented incidents of emotional abuse, the financial records proving her deceit, the testimonies from others who had been similarly victimized. With each revelation, the gasps and whispers grew louder, the tide of public opinion shifting inexorably against Marlene. "She is a toxic force, poisoning our lives with her lies and manipulation," I declared, my voice ringing out over the stunned silence. And I, for one, refused to be silent any longer. Marlene's face twisted into a mask of pure, unbridled fury, but it was too late. The truth had been laid bare, and there was no turning back. Carson stepped forward then, his hand finding mine in a silent show of solidarity. "My wife speaks the truth," he said, his voice steady and unwavering. "For too long, I allowed my love for my mother to blind me to her true nature. But no more." He turned to face Marlene, his gaze steely and resolute. "You have manipulated and deceived us for the last time, Mother. It's over." The silence that followed was deafening, a collective holding of breath as the community grappled with the shocking revelations. And then, slowly, one by one, voices began to rise, voices of support, of outrage, of shared experiences and newfound courage. As the chorus of condemnation swelled around her, Marlene's carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing the true, twisted depths of her toxic nature. She raged and sputtered, hurling accusations and threats like wildfire, but it was too late. The truth had been set free, and in that moment, I knew that no matter what came next, we had already won. The chains of fear and manipulation that had bound us for so long had been broken, and we were finally free. The fallout from the community event was swift and merciless. Overnight, Marlene went from a respected pillar of society to a pariah, her carefully cultivated image shattered beyond repair. As the evidence of her manipulation and deceit spread like wildfire, her so-called friends and admirers turned on her in a heartbeat, distancing themselves from the toxic cloud that had once been her sphere of influence. One by one, she was forced to resign from her various community positions and committees, her reputation in tatters. The once revered grande dame of our small town had become a cautionary tale, a living embodiment of the dangers of unchecked narcissism and manipulation. But it was the legal ramifications that truly drove the knife home. Armed with irrefutable proof of her financial misdeeds, Carson and I were able to reclaim control of his late father's estate, assets that Marlene had been siphoning off for years to fund her lavish lifestyle and maintain her stranglehold over our family. As the lawyers pored over the records, more and more evidence of her duplicity came to light, painting a picture of a woman so consumed by greed and a lust for power that she was willing to sacrifice her own flesh and blood on the altar of her ambition. Through it all, Marlene remained defiant, lashing out at anyone and everyone who dared to cross her path. Her once silver tongue turned to acid, spewing venom and vitriol in a desperate attempt to cling to the tattered remnants of her former glory. "You ungrateful wretches," she spat venomously one day, her perfectly manicured facade crumbling as she hurled insults at Carson and me. "You think you've won? You've ruined me." But we were unmoved, standing our ground with a newfound strength and resolve that she could never hope to comprehend. "No, Mother," Carson said, his voice resonating with a calm authority that would have once been unthinkable. "We haven't ruined you. You did that to yourself the moment you chose to manipulate and deceive the people who loved you most." Marlene recoiled as if she'd been struck, her eyes wide and wild with disbelief. But before she could unleash another torrent of vitriol, I stepped forward, my own voice steady and unwavering. "It's over, Marlene," I said, my gaze locking with hers. "The lies, the manipulation, the toxic hold you've had over this family, it all ends here. You've lost." For a moment she seemed to waver, her carefully constructed mask slipping to reveal a flicker of something unexpected. Fear. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a sneer of defiance. "Mark my words," she hissed, her eyes narrowing to slits. "You haven't seen the last of me. I will make you pay for this, even if it's the last thing I do." And with that, she turned on her heel and stormed off, leaving a trail of broken promises and hollow threats in her wake. In the weeks and months that followed, we watched as Marlene's once gilded world crumbled around her. Stripped of her ill-gotten wealth and social standing, she was forced to downsize to a modest apartment, her designer wardrobe and lavish baubles sold off to pay her mounting legal fees. It was a humbling fall from grace, one that would have been almost pitiable if not for the knowledge of the pain and suffering she had inflicted on others for so long. But as Marlene's star faded, ours burned brighter than ever. With the funds recovered from the legal settlement, Carson and I were finally able to purchase our dream home, a beautiful, spacious property that had once been far beyond our reach. As we stood on the front porch, taking in the pristine landscaping and the warm, welcoming facade, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We had weathered the storm, emerging battered but unbroken, our love and resilience forged in the fires of adversity. And in that moment, as I looked into Carson's eyes and saw the promise of a future untainted by Marlene's toxic influence, I knew that we had truly won. Not just a battle, but a war for the very soul of our family. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains, bathing our new bedroom in a warm, golden glow. As I slowly opened my eyes, I was greeted by the sight of Carson sleeping peacefully beside me, his features relaxed and content. It had been 6 months since we'd moved into our dream home, and yet the novelty of waking up in this sanctuary untainted by Marlene's toxic influence had yet to wear off. A contented smile tugged at my lips as I watched the steady rise and fall of Carson's chest, reveling in the serenity of the moment. So much had changed in such a short span of time, and yet, in many ways, it felt like we were just beginning. The legal battles and public fallout had taken their toll, but they had also forged a newfound strength and resilience within us, a bond that could never be broken, no matter what storms life might throw our way. As Carson stirred beside me, his eyes fluttering open, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride and gratitude. We had weathered the worst and emerged victorious, our love and commitment to each other stronger than ever before. "Morning," he murmured, his voice still thick with sleep as he pulled me closer. "Morning," I replied, pressing a soft kiss to his forehead. "Sleep well?" He nodded, a contented smile spreading across his face. Like a baby. No more nightmares about my mother. We shared a quiet chuckle at the dark humor, a testament to how far we'd come in our ability to confront and even find levity in the trauma we'd endured. As we lay there, basking in the comfortable silence, my mind drifted to the remarkable journey that had brought us to this point. My once fledgling blog, born out of a desperate need to cope with Marlene's toxicity, had blossomed into a thriving online community, a safe haven for others grappling with similar family dynamics. What had started as a solitary outlet had become a movement, empowering countless individuals to break free from the chains of manipulation and emotional abuse. And in the process, I had found my true calling, not just as a writer but as a guide, a beacon of hope for those struggling to find their own voices. "You know," Carson said, his voice breaking the comfortable silence, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm almost grateful for what happened with my mother." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued by his unexpected admission. "Don't get me wrong, what she put us through was inexcusable," he continued, his expression turning somber. "But if it hadn't been for her toxic behavior, we might never have found the strength to stand up for ourselves and build the life we have now." I nodded slowly, his words resonating deep within me. He was right. As painful and traumatic as our ordeal had been, it had also been a catalyst for growth, forcing us to confront our deepest fears and insecurities head-on. "You're right," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "And as hard as it was, I wouldn't change a thing, because it led us here, to this moment, to the happiness and peace we found together." Carson's eyes shone with unshed tears, his lips curving into a tender smile. "Exactly. We survived her toxicity, and now we get to thrive on our own terms." As he pulled me closer, cradling me in his embrace, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. We had been through hell and back, but we had emerged on the other side stronger, wiser, and more deeply connected than ever before. And in that moment, as I gazed out at the sun-dappled landscape of our new life, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. A united front, bolstered by the knowledge that love and resilience could conquer even the darkest of adversities.